Star Wars collectors, and welcome to another Bossk's Bounty video, and welcome to the worst vintage collection figures and card backs voted by you. So just before Christmas I did a poll which managed to get about 500 votes, where you guys voted for your best and worst vintage collection figures and card backs. I've already done the video for the best, so if you haven't checked out that video I will leave a link in the description below so you can check that one out. This one is going to be for the worst figures. We're going to go through the 10 worst figures and then we're going to go through the 10 worst card backs. So if you do happen to enjoy this video, don't forget to drop a like down below because it really helps the video and the channel. And let's get on to the worst figures. And in 10th place of the worst vintage collection figures, we have Han Solo Yavin Ceremony. He has 1.9% of the vote. And I do apologise, I do not have the figure loose to show you, but we can have a look at him inside the bubble. And ultimately, I'm quite surprised this one is in the top 10 worst figures. It's probably got something to do with the extraordinarily large head that the figure does have. The head is far too large for this figure, and that's probably why he's in the list. In terms of Han Solos, there is much better Han Solos out there, and he's in 10th place. In 9th place, we have Dulte Define. He got 2.2% of the vote, and I do have this figure loose. Here he is here. Lots of soft goods, but lots of plastic as well. I tend to think that this does actually look like it's who it's supposed to look like. Of course, the figure and the character don't really do much. And that's probably why he's in the list. Obviously, there's going to be much better figures than this. But in terms of, you know, what it's supposed to look like, I think it looks like the character. Possibly it's got some poor articulation and things like that. But you can't argue with the voters. And he is in 9th place with 2.2% of the vote. And in 8th place with 2.8% of the vote is Rey from the Rise of Skywalker. And I've got to admit, this is one that I do think is probably a little bit unfair. I think it's got more to do with the sort of dislike for the character and for the film possibly. The figure itself is actually a very good figure. It's got a great likeness in my opinion. The articulation's great. The accessories you get with the figure are very good. And also I think there's something that not a lot of people know, and that's that the Luke Skywalker X-Wing figure, the helmet that came with that figure, this helmet here, was actually designed with a ridge in the back so that it could fit over Rey's hair on this figure. So let's give that a go now. And there you go. So yeah, a lot of people don't like that image, her using Luke Skywalker's X-Wing helmet, but that's what it's for. The figure can do that. As I say, she's in 8th place with 2.8% of the vote. In 7th place with 2.9% of the vote is Nom Anor, and I do apologise, I do not have this figure carded and I do not have this figure loose either. This would possibly be my vote for worst figure. That it's a very difficult one. I just can't stand the figure. I think it looks like something out of Masters of the Universe, possibly Skeletor, something like that. I've never liked it and I've never bought it because of that reason. Obviously, to complete the run of the vintage collection, I will have to pick it up at some point, but it will be last. I've got 2 or 3 more to go and he will be last. But I can understand why he is in this list with 2.9% of the vote. In joint 6th and 5th place with 3.3% of the vote is Queen Amidala and Ben Quadineros. And I've got to agree with people that have voted these for the worst figure. This is another one that I've never liked. I think it just looks ridiculous in my opinion. And Queen Amidala, it's more like a statue really. Again, I don't own either of those two loose and I have no plans to either. And yep, they are in the top 10 voted by you guys for the worst figure in the vintage collection. They are joint 6th and 5th place with 3.3% of the vote. And in 4th place with 3.6% of the vote, we have C-3PO on the Empire Strikes Back card, VC06. Again, I can understand why this one's high up in the list. A lot of people don't like this figure. It's inaccurate to the character. He should be vac metalized, and also he does come up a little bit short. And not just short, in general, just quite diddy and small. I don't think he's too screen accurate, and I think that is why he's going to be in the list for the worst vintage collection figure. And in 3rd place, with 4.1% of the vote, we have Jaku. And again, I think this has probably got more to do with the character than the figure itself. The figure isn't that bad. Of course, it's a repack from the Black Series 3.75. It started off the comeback of the vintage collection. But, you know, man, it's got some decent accessories. It's got a head swap as well that you can, as you can see in the bubble there, you can put this thing on with a scarf on instead of her head. Of course, the figure doesn't have the photo reel anymore, so she does look quite doll-like. But I don't think this is necessarily a really bad figure. I think it's a little bit unfair. I think it's just got more to do with the character, and that's fair enough. Some people don't like the character. But she is in third place with 4.1% of the vote. And in second place of the worst vintage collection figure voted by you is Jin Erso with 4.7% of the vote. There she is. It's got to be said, it's not a great figure. The hips are a bit dodgy and the head sculpt, although I think it does look a bit like her. I think it's, again, it's very doll-like. You know, without the photo reel, it doesn't look great. And of course, this is another one of those ones from the 3.75-inch Black Series that was repacked. And they just didn't do very well in the vintage collection when the vintage collection came back. So that might be something to do with it. But she is the second to worst vintage collection figure ever voted by you with 4.7% of the vote. And in first place, or last place, whichever way you want to think of it, with a whopping 11.3% of the vote for the worst figure in the vintage collection is Supreme Leader Snoke from The Last Jedi. Now, my loose version of this was actually given to my son. I haven't bothered opening up another one of these. I do have a couple of these cards. Maybe it's something to do with the gold robe. Maybe it's something to do with the fact that people don't really like the sequel trilogy, or a lot of people don't like the sequel trilogy. Maybe it's got something to do with that. Maybe it's the fact that it's just, you know, although the head sculpt's pretty good and it does look like, you know, the person who's supposed to look like from the film, he doesn't really do a lot, does he? And underneath that gold robe, he is a horrible, skinny runt of a man. Let's just say that. He's not looking great. He needs to eat some cheeseburgers. But there you go. That is the worst figure in the vintage collection voted by you guys with a whopping 11.3% of the vote. So let's now move on to the card backs. So in terms of the card backs, in joint 10th and 9th place, we have Hondo, Anaka and Quinlan from the Phantom Menace. And it's quite easy to see why these ones have been voted, especially with Quinlan. It's a bit of a dodgy picture that it looks like a painting to me. Not a massively well-known character particularly, so that's maybe another reason why it's high up in the list. But from a card back point of view, it really doesn't do a lot, does it? It doesn't really stand out. Hondo's a nice big picture of Hondo there, but for me, you know, of course, that is an image of him, of the animatronics version of him from Galaxy's Edge, but it is a drawing, it's a painting, and it doesn't look great. And I think a lot of people prefer the Clone Wars version of Hondo to that one, so maybe that's why that one's so high up on the list. And they both got 1.9% of the vote, so it's not a massive huge thing, 1.9%, but it does put them both into the top 10. Alright then, so this one surprised me a little bit. In joint 8th and 7th place, we have the TIE Fighter Pilot and ARC Trooper 5s with 2.2% of the vote each. I'm not actually too surprised with ARC Trooper 5s, if I'm honest. I think the image that they've used for that is inaccurate. His hairstyle, he doesn't have the tattoo. There's a lot that's going wrong with that image. It is a drawing, but of course it is from the Clone Wars, so you can sort of let them off. The figure's great, obviously, but the card back, you know, there's some inaccuracies there. The one I'm really surprised with is the TIE Fighter Pilot. I mean, this is one of the classic images, this. Of course, maybe some of the people that were voting don't go on nostalgia, but for me, the TIE Fighter Pilot and that card back, even though it hasn't got an image of the character, it's one of those classics because of that reason. It hasn't got the character on it. It's a scene from the movie, not the Return of the Jedi, mind, from The Empire Strikes Back, but saying that, it's still a great image, and I'm really surprised that that one is, you know, within the top 10 of the worst card backs in the vintage collection. In 6th place, with 2.5% of the vote, we have C-3PO. And poor old C-3PO has been now included in both sections of this, both categories, worst figure and now worst card back. And to be honest, I don't think this is one of the worst card backs. I think the only reason this card back is in the list, possibly because it should be on a Star Wars chase. They've got the wrong film. Of course, that did happen back in the day of the Kenner days. They did move the figures on and change the logos. But this guy should really be on a Star Wars card. I think everybody knows that and everybody agrees with that. But the image is straight from the movie. It's an absolute classic. So I am quite surprised that he is in the top 10. But he is there with 2.5% of the votes of the worst card back, and that's C-3PO. In 5th place of the worst card backs is Rey from the Rise of Skywalker with 2.8% of the vote. And again, Rey is in both categories. So this card back, again, I don't believe that this is one of the worst card backs. It is a sort of promo shot, but I like the colours and everything, the greens. Do like that planet that she's on, but I think it's got more to do with the character that she's that she's in these lists personally, but people just can't let it go. But you know what I mean. It's Rey from the Rise of Skywalker, and you know, the people have spoken. She is in 5th place, 2.8% for the vote of the worst card back. In 4th place with 3% of the vote is the Twin Pod Cloud Car Pilot. And again, this is another card back from the original Kenner days. So I am quite surprised that it is in the list, but I've got to admit it is a little bit boring. It is also out of focus. It's got to be fair. These cards are often better when they've got an offer sticker on them or something like that. Certainly back in the Kenner days, you always want like a nice offer sticker there just to break the card back up a little bit because it is a bit plain and boring. But yep, he's in 4th place with 3% of the vote. That's the Cloud Car Pilot. In 3rd place with 4.1% of the vote is the Han Solo Stormtrooper card back. And this is one that I wholeheartedly agree with. It's definitely in the top 5 worst vintage collection card backs because of the fact that it's such an amazing character and they could have just done so much better with it. It is a weird card back. You've got that sort of red tinge going on because of inside the trash compactor and the red light and everything. But it just looks like his head's been sort of superimposed on the body. I mean, it probably is a still taken from the film, but it just doesn't look right. It's overly grainy, and I think there's just so many more images of Han Solo in the Stormtrooper disguise that they could have picked. Very, very weird choice, and that is why a lot of people agree. 4.1% think that is the worst card back. And in 2nd place, with 4.7% of the vote, we have Supreme Leader Snoke. Another veteran of these lists. He's in both lists, isn't he? That card back. Is it the character that people don't like, or is it the card back? I think the card back isn't too bad. At least it looks like it's a still from the film. Obviously, he is a CGI character, so he's going to look a bit CGI on the card back. But I think it's probably got more to do with the film that he's from and the character that he is, and the fact that he was wasted in those films, really. And also, he is a rubbish figure, it's got to be said. So VC121, Supreme Leader Snoke. He is officially the 2nd worst vintage collection card back. So what could possibly be in 1st place that's worse than this? And the answer to that is, of course, the Han Solo from Solo, a Star Wars Story. He is top of the pile. 9.4% of the vote think he is the worst card back. And it's hard to disagree if we just look a bit closer. The image is absolutely terrible. It's got to be said. Superimposed or photoshopped, CGI'd, whatever you want to say. It is pretty awful. And I would probably have to agree that this is the one that I would most probably vote for. Maybe Han Solo Stormtrooper, just because of the pure disappointment of that card back. But the people have spoken. You have spoken. That is what you voted for. 9.4% of people out there think that this card back, the Han Solo from Solo, a Star Wars Story, is the worst card back. So there you go then, guys. That is the worst figures and worst card backs voted by you guys. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Let me know your worst, your best, whatever you want to put in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.